Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emma, also known as Made in the Moment, and in this tutorial I am going to show you how to make the over-the-shoulder boulder holder. I have added some updates, so it has a clasp at the back now. This is approximately the 1-year anniversary of this pattern being released, and so to celebrate, I wanted to make a free video tutorial for people that prefer video tutorials or don't want to pay for a pattern or can't afford it. But this has gone through a testing process and it has been tested up to a size G/H cup. So there are a lot of different variations that people have done, a lot of different boulder sizes. The written pattern is available on my website if you're interested in that as well. And here are some of my testers. Like I said, there's quite a few different versions and they're all tagged, so if you want to go check out their accounts, then I highly recommend because they did an amazing job and they were super helpful in fine-tuning and refining this pattern. If you like this video and want to see what else I'm up to, follow me on Instagram and TikTok. I post pretty regularly on both of those. And I have a Patreon, which really helps everything that I'm doing and makes it so that I can make all of these free tutorials for you. But that's all I have to say, so without further ado, let's get into the video. What you're going to need for this tutorial is some yarn. You'll probably only need about 50 grams, but I have 100 grams just to be safe so I don't run out. And then you will need a crochet hook that is 0.5 or 1 millimeter smaller than the recommended size on the yarn. So my yarn recommends a 5 millimeter hook and I'm going to use a 4 millimeter hook. Then you will also need a tape measure, a yarn needle, a stitch marker, and then a few optional materials depending on how you want the back to come together. You can either do ties, in which case you'll just crochet ties and tie them together. Or you can do bra clasps, and there's obviously a lot of options with that. I'll show you what I have, and then you can also order things and use that instead. But if you are wanting to use the bra clasps, then you will also need a sewing needle and sewing thread, preferably in the same color as the yarn that you are using. So you're going to take your yarn and start with a slip knot and put that onto your hook and tighten. And you're going to start with a foundation single crochet row. You're going to start by chaining 2 and then inserting your hook into that first chain, so the second one from the hook, yarning over, pull through, yarn over and pull through just that first loop. So that is basically a chain stitch. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. That's the single crochet. So back into where you made that chain stitch, yarn over, pull through 1, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And I will link a video tutorial that I made showing this technique slowed down a little bit if you've never done it before, so that you can watch it in more detail. But you're going to make a foundation single crochet row that measures the length of measurement A. To find measurement A, you're going to take a tape measure and measure basically the bottom part of your boob. So from the bottom all the way up to your nipple, but that is what you are starting off with. My measurement A is about 2 inches, and so this is about 2 inches. And after you have reached that point, you're going to insert into that same stitch you just went into and make 1 more single crochet. And then place a stitch marker into that stitch. So that stitch at the end now has 2 stitches in it, and you're going to go in a 3rd time. So now you have 3 stitches in that end one. The second one has a stitch marker in it, and you're just going to go down the row, making single crochets along the back of the foundation single crochet row. Once you've made it to the end, you see that you have gone all the way around that foundation single crochet row, and then you're going to turn your work and without chaining 1, just single crochet all the way back up the side until you get to that stitch marker. And then in the stitch with the stitch marker, you're going to take that out for a second and make 3 single crochets and place that stitch marker back into the second of those 3 single crochets, which I didn't do because I forgot. And then you're just going to go back down the side. And then you are just going to keep repeating those steps until the width of your cup covers as much of your boob as you want it to. So I have a finished one right here that I will show you so you can see an idea of what it looks like. And the sides are going to curl up a little bit before blocking, but that will all be worked out. And mine has a pretty medium coverage for my size, which is about 3 inches across the side. But you can literally make this as big or as small as you want. The only thing that you want to look out for is that it doesn't get too tall. So that's why we're starting with that like under boob measurement to start with and not the whole length of the boob. So when you finish the first cup, you're going to cut the yarn, but on the second cup, you're going to leave the yarn attached, and we're going to connect the cups now. So once you get to the end of the second cup, you're going to make a row of single crochets across the bottom of the cup. So you're going to start by chaining 1, and then into each of the rows along the bottom, you're going to place 1 single crochet. There are usually these little holes where it's pretty obvious where the stitch is supposed to go. So you're just going to place 1 single crochet along each row along the bottom. And you want to make sure that you don't do too many, because then it will start to ruffle a little bit. And you also want to make sure you don't do too few, because then it will pull together in a way that it shouldn't. So you really want the bottom to lay flat. Take your time figuring out where to insert your hook, especially if you're a beginner. I remember this was pretty tricky for me when I first started. But now you're just going to go all the way across the bottom of the cup. And once you get to the end, you're going to grab the second cup. So you're going to go across the cup, insert your hook, yarn, and make a single crochet. And then you're just going to make single crochets all the way down the row. I was supposed to say the row. I have no idea what happened with the audio. And once you have the cups connected, you're going to make a row of single crochets again across the bottom. So chain 1, turn your work. Oops. Make sure that it's not twisted in the middle. So just turn your work like that and single crochet across that row of single crochets that you just made. And before I do that, I'm going to be annoying and weave in my end. So to do that, I'm just threading my yarn needle and then inserting into the side of the cup. I'm going up a few stitches, and then I'm going to turn around and go in the opposite direction. I like to do this so that when the fabric stretches, the end doesn't pop out. And now I'm just going to single crochet all the way across the row into every single stitch that you just made across the bottom of the cups. And once you get to the end of the row, this is where you have to decide if you want to do a clasp back or tie backs, and that's going to determine the amount that you're going to chain. So if you're doing a tie back, you're going to chain until that chain is equal to your entire bust measurement. So this is your under bust. For me, that is 28 inches. So if I were doing a tie, I would make each side of the tie 28 inches. So this is to make sure that you have enough room for it to go around the back and then to tie it. But if you are doing a clasp back, which is what I'm doing, you're going to take that same under bust measurement, divide that by 4, and subtract 1 inch. So this is because when you pull the chain, it'll stretch a little bit, and you want the clasps to be pretty tight in the back. So I have reached my under bust measurement minus 1 inch, and now I'm going to turn and go back along the chain. And same thing, I'm going into those back bumps of the chain. If this is too complicated for you, just go into the chain however you know how. But I'm just single crocheting all the way until I get back to the cups. And once I make it back to the cups, again, I'm going to check to make sure this isn't twisted. And then I'm just going to go into those single crochets at the bottom of the cups. And you're just going to single crochet all the way across the row. Again, always check to make sure that the cups are not twisted around because that happens pretty easily. But you want to make sure that the single crochet row is just going all the way across. And I've made it all the way across. So now I'm going to, instead of chaining, I'm going to do a foundation single crochet row. And this is because this will be equal to the chain and that single crochet row we did on the other side. So I'm going to go into that same stitch that I just did on the end, yarn over, pull through, then yarn over, pull through 1, that's like the chain stitch, and then yarn over, pull through those 2, and that is like the single crochet stitch. So again, going into that chain that I just made, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over, chain, and then yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, chain, yarn over, pull through 2. And I'm going to keep going until the length of this foundation single crochet is the same length as the chain was on the other side. And once I reach the end of my foundation single crochet, I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. And again, checking to make sure it's not twisted, I'm going to go along the top edge of that chain and all the way across to the end of the other strap. If I'm doing ties, I am not going to go ahead and do an extra row of single crochets. So you would just do that foundation single crochet and then that would be it. But for the clasps, I want to make sure that this bottom band is large enough to cover the width of the clasp. So you're just going to keep going with single crochet rows until it will fit the clasp on it. So for me, my clasp is a little bit wider because it comes from a bra band, but if you just have those little hooks or if you have some other way to connect them, then you might have a thinner one as well. So like I said, if you're doing the ties, you're done now, but if you're doing the clasps, you want to grab your sewing needle and your thread, and I'm going to grab the bra that I thrifted to use for this. So I have these 2 clasps in the back, and I'm just going to cut them off. And the nice thing about using a bra that's already constructed is that these are really, really stable and they're very well like sewn together. First, I'm going to cut off this little tag, and then I'm going to make sure to cut to the left of the seam so that the clasp part all stays sewn together because that seam is just holding that tag on. So I'm just going to cut through right here carefully. These scissors are not my ideal scissors. So I have that one side, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And now I have my little clasps and my bra, and I'm going to make sure that I put them on the right direction. So I'm going to lay my bra flat with the back facing me, and this part of the clasp will go on the outside of the bottom band, like this, and then the other side of the clasp will go on the inside of the bottom band. So I'm going to grab my thread and my little sewing needle, and I always like to double up the thread, so I'm going to thread my needle and then pull that through until it is the length that I want it to. And I always give myself more length than I think I need to because I hate running out of thread. So once I have it the length that I want it, then I'm going to cut that other end. And then I usually double or triple knot those two ends together so it's nice and secure. And I should preface this by saying I'm not like a professional sewist. I don't do a ton of hand sewing. This is just like how my mom taught me to sew on buttons when I was little, so take this all with a grain of salt. But what I do next is I insert my needle into this back corner just through the bra clasp part, so not through the crochet yet because I want to hide the knot. So this is a nice and thick piece of fabric, so it's taking a little bit of pushing to get through, but I pull that through and then hide that knot in between the two layers of fabric. And then I just go back in through both layers of fabric now, through the clasp and the crochet, and then pull the needle through. And then I'm going to go back through, this time through the crochet fabric first, and then through the clasp, and go up, and then go back through the other way. And I literally will just go like this all the way around. I'm not going to worry about my stitches being like even or too neat because I am going to crochet a little thing to cover this up at the end. And after I've done my final stitch, I'm going to secure the yarn. So to do that, I just go into the crochet part and am going to tie a little knot. Again, I don't know if this is how you're supposed to do it. I'm just showing you what I do. So I'm tying a few knots back here, and remember, this is the part that will be against my back. So again, doesn't matter how it looks, but if you do have a very contrasting thread, then I would maybe be like a little bit more careful with how it looks, but just tied a few knots, and then I'm going to basically like weave in the end into the crochet part. So I'm just going to go in a few stitches, and I'm trying to make the end go in between those two layers of fabric. And there it is. You can't see it already. It's pretty covered up, but I'm just going to go in the other way again so that it can't like come out really easily. And then I'm going to trim that end, and that's it. And then I'm going to repeat that with the other clasp. The most important thing is to make sure that you sew it in the correct direction. So if you are concerned about that, then I would like literally clasp the clasps together and then lay the crochet part on top so you can see where it's supposed to go. But I'm going to repeat those exact same steps of doubling up the yarn, attaching it, and then sewing all the way around. And another step that's optional, but I think is nice, especially if you have like a 3-tiered bra clasp, I don't know what the actual word is for it, is I'm going to make a little crochet cover. So I'm just going to chain enough that it goes across the width of this clasp. So just like that, I chained 4, and then I'm going to chain 1 more. So that's like the turning chain. So you want that to completely cover over both edges as well as just across the top. And I'm going to sew this down with a needle and thread once I'm done. So it's okay if it needs to stretch a little bit, but then I'm just going to single crochet across that first row. So here's what it looks like so far, and because I want this to cover everything, I am scooting that bottom part down a little bit, and I'm going to make 1 more row of single crochet. And this is what it looks like now. So it really covers everything right up to those little clasp parts. So the next row, I'm going to make kind of a little window. So I'm going to chain 1, single crochet, and then I'm going to do a stacked single crochet. So I'm going to go into that spot right in between the 2 legs of the single crochet and single crochet again. You can also double crochet if that's easier. And then I'm going to chain across. So I have 6 stitches. I'm going to chain 4 because I have the first stitch, 4, and then 1 in the last stitch. And then I'm going to make a double crochet in that last stitch there. And that is the little window that will go across the top of the clasp. And I'll be able to do the hooks in between there, and it'll cover it up. So I'm just going to continue down the row depending on how many rows of clasps you have or the shape of your clasps. It'll determine what you're doing. So if you have exactly what I have, then you'll continue what I'm doing. So the next row, I'm going to just do single crochets across the row again. And then I'm going to do another window row. So chain 1, stacked single crochet, chain across however many stitches minus 1, and then double crochet in the last stitch. And then I'm going to do another row of single crochets, and then another window, and then another row of single crochets. Once I've finished all those rows, I'm going to weave in the ends. And then I'm going to sew this little crochet cover onto the top of the clasps using my sewing needle and thread. So I'm going to do a very similar thing that I did for the clasps, but because now this fabric has gotten quite thick, there's 3 layers of things. So I'm just going to sew the crochet edges together. And I'm just going around the perimeter of this cover. I'm not actually going to sew the chains that go across because I want those to be able to be moved as I am clasping, depending on which one I'm going into, if that makes sense. And once I get to this edge, I am going to go through the crochet layers so that I am encasing the clasps in that. So to figure out the length of the straps, you're going to put the bralette on and clasp it or tie it in the back, and then chain an amount that goes over your shoulder, and then you're going to put it over your shoulder. You might need some help with this, like if you have a friend to help you look at this, but you're going to pull it pretty tightly and lay it like nice and flat over your shoulder. So this needs like a little bit more length still because I want it to not have to like stretch that far, but I also don't want it to be too long. You don't want it all the way over by the clasp. You don't want it too close to you. You want it to really sit like right over your shoulder. Again, this is a little tricky. It's going to take a little bit of finagling, but once you have found the spot and once you've figured out the length of the chain, then you're going to put a stitch marker and mark the chain and also mark the spot on the back of the band. And like I said, this chain actually is a little bit too short. In this video clip, I ended up pinning it here and trying to make it work, but it ended up being too short. So this is a good example of something that's like maybe 4 stitches too short. You really don't want it to be so tight that it's like pressing on your shoulder. And I also pinned it way too close to the clasp. This is all stuff that I fixed again off camera, but I think where I was holding it, you can see where it was supposed to go. And again, like I said, I messed up a little bit on the placement of this, so I did have to go back off camera and fix it. So you do want it to be a little bit further over from the clasp, but once you have marked your spot and marked your stitch, you're going to take the chain and make sure it's not twisted. So make sure that all of the bumps are on one side and all of the little V's are on the other side. This is very important because if it's twisted once you put it in, it'll be twisted when you wear it. And then you're going to go into the 2 back loops of the stitch. So you can see the V on top, but then you're going to go into the 2 back loops and just make a slip stitch. So you're going to yarn over, pull through, and then pull through that loop that's already on your hook. And then you're going to make 1 more slip stitch in the direction of the clasps on this side, and then turn your work, and you're going to go back up the chain towards the cup again. The first stitch is usually the hardest just because you slip stitched, so it's a little bit tight. But what you want to do is try and go into that back loop, like the bump behind the V. You can see me struggling to get my hook in there. And then you are just going to single crochet all the way up the chain. So the way I like to do this is go into those back bumps. I think it makes a nice cleaner edge, but you're just going to go all the way back up until you get to the cup. So I have made it all the way back to the tip of the cup, and I'm going to insert my hook into that middle stitch and slip stitch, and then pull through and weave in my ends. So I'm going to take my yarn needle and thread that end. This one's a little shorter because I had to break it with my hands because I was trying to make this on the train and I didn't have scissors. So leave yourself a longer tail than this, and then go same thing where I go in one direction down the bra cup and then in the other direction the opposite way. And once you've finished weaving in your ends, then you're done. I highly recommend wet blocking this because it will help relax the yarn and keep the cups from curling so much, and it also washes the bra, which is great if you're going to be wearing it on your skin. You can look up videos on how to do that on YouTube and TikTok. There's a ton of them. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you make this and post about it, then please tag me on Instagram or TikTok at Made in the Moment. I love seeing what you make. Have a great rest of your day.